I mean gender as in a category of self. Gender is very personal to me. I am a gender variant person and a Black woman. When I refer to what my genders are, I'm paying homage to the spirits that I hold in my body. When we think about gender expansion, I think about the various ways we may get a gender or a few. I think about roles. I think about the ancestors of people who I've worked with, clients as an example, where a common theme is their ancestors going, I mean, you could call me like, insert gender label, but is that really what we are? No, that's not really a term that's original to us. That's not even an energy that is super original to us. But because the energy of that particular term that you're trying to call us is oriented in the way that it is oriented in a way that matches a term that we do use or maybe we do engage with, therefore I might line up and identify with this gender for your sake. I think about those ancestors who constantly come around, especially who were existing pre-colonially, but then it's also plenty of spirits who reject the genders that we've come to use at this point altogether, and they'll tell you straight up, girl, like, I'm a plant, like, what else do you want me to say? What else are you trying to like force on me? Why are you doing this? Like, my gender is literally this very specific plant. My gender is caretaking for this specific area of the water, this river, this particular river. My whole family does this. This is our gender. It could be anything like that. There's genders that you inherit. There's genders that run through your families, because spirits run through families, right? And some people's genders are very literally just elements. Some people's genders have nothing or even just very little to do with this, particular physical world. Some people's genders are just non-human entities, right? Or partially that we've been birthed into, or that, have been birthed into us, I should say. Some of my genders also come from spirits that govern specific parts of my bodies. And for people who identify as maybe not having a gender, being agender, they might be in more alignment with voidness, right? Their specific destinies being more windy and affiliated with weaving in between times and spaces, much more than others. And so gender expansion, it looks like a lot of different things, right? And we should let that happen so that we can let ourselves be spiritually fulfilled and whole, and not just subscribe to the most popular labels out there, if that's not really our truth, you feel me? And so these are genders that, are your roles or hint at your roles. That's what I think about. And as Black people redetermining and recommitting to connections to indigeneity, especially on a constant basis, it's especially important to consider gender in that process, not just learning who taught you about yourself, but also wondering, where do you want your gender to take you? How does your gender and your destiny actually relate to one another? My gender shifts because my spirit shifts. For me, it's one soul that shifts into different spirits, but not at the same time. So 3 different spirits are not fully in my body at one time. Those spirits may be elsewhere. And then maybe one of those spirits might come down, and then my core spirit, what I call like default Tay, my everyday Tay, will make room or partially shift, or even completely shift into that spirit that just came down, maybe to complete a job, or what have you, and it just depends. But my best way to understand it, and that has been with the help of my own people, is, that it's not always 3 or more spirits, more separate spirits, / entities that are seated or grounded in one body at all times, because we also be doing stuff, outside of the physical world. And so we come down at different times. And so the key word is that grounded piece, because for some people there are really, 2 or more spirits fully seated in one body. So it's good to be able to make those types of distinctions. But so gender expansion, it helps for people to see that their gender often does not come from the physical world or physical world traits alone. It's about the orientation and style of our spirits. Now, regarding pronouns, I, default Tay, everyday Tay, personally, I use she, her, and he, him pronouns. It's similar to how oftentimes if I say we in regards to my business, my work, my career, I'm paying respects to and crediting my spirits for taking part in something too, whether it's, ancestors, non-ancestral spirits, and creatures, or my other spirits, my other genders, that, also just come with my soul. Most of the time, anytime I am to be called he, him pronouns, it's just, you're paying homage to one of the main spirits that mind shifts into or meets with. And so it's acknowledging, not only their presence, but behind these closed doors, behind my eyes, but also their work. And then another thing about my gender as well is that I don't want no gender label that white people can claim to. So, even when you see me identifying as a woman, no, I'm not just a woman. I'm a Black woman. Black woman is my gender, because you have no idea, if you are not a Black woman, how these two things go together. And our conceptions of what a woman is, they won't resonate, right? They not gonna add up if you're not a Black woman too. And so, if you are a woman but not Black, you have no idea of what composes my gender. We talk about this a little bit in episode 4 of Tay in the Water podcast as well, which was the interview with Faith Grace Williams, which is called Negro in Vogue, Negro Cultural Garb, and Black Woman is My Gender. Because Black woman is my home gender, is how I describe it, which means that oftentimes, no matter where my spirit goes to, no matter where or what else it shifts into, at the end of the day, it always comes home to rest in the gender that is Black woman. But so continuing this statement, though I'm a gender variant person, I don't identify as a trans or non-binary person, because those terms in particular, they feel quite white to me and not for me. And when I read the energy of those terms, it feels even more obvious that I nor my people were being thought of at the time of its growth, at the time of them being used increasingly in the ways that they are. There's also a question that governed one of the guests on Indigiqueer, an episode of All My Relations podcast. I'm not condoning that podcast, I just remember that episode. And that question that one of the guests asked was, what is it to be born into a past as well as the same time illegible to it? And for me, I connect that question here because the term trans is not one that calls me home. Now, when it comes to transphobia, we also need to know and recognize that transphobia is a spiritual attack. Transphobia and to be against expressions of gender variance, you're telling people not to trust themselves, their intuition. Even when kids or older people tell you who they are, you're telling them, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know yourself, you're denying them agency. When they already know very well how to read their spirits, they know very well what their spirits are telling them, who they are, what they are, who are they not, right? Things like that. And so to deny that is also partially to deny them their spiritual selves, because you're intercepting, you're disrupting their ability and capacity to recognize themselves spiritually. But you're also just flat out denying people their right to exist in their bodies. Like, if I don't feel comfortable existing in this body because I know that it needs to change, but you're not letting me, then you're also denying me the right to be in my body, because I'm not going to stay here if I don't feel comfortable. There's plenty of people who won't stay in their bodies because they don't feel comfortable, because, well, why should they, right? If others are doing everything in their power to keep them from themselves, that's the gamble. And so you're literally denying people's spirits to be in the physical world, whether it's forcing them into dissociation, returning to the spirit world before, it was even their time, or anything else. That's what's happening. My advice to people both young and old and in between who are always on the verge of coming into themselves, don't be afraid if your gender changes. Do not be afraid if your gender changes, right? Like, I'm thinking, as an example with me, as a gender variant person and the different shifts that I experience, but also I'm thinking about the baby spirits that I work with, the spirits of the unborn that I watch and oversee. Because most of them, their genders be changing all the time, and they'll be super open about, who they are, and, they might not identify with the terms that we have for gender in the Western world, for example, but they don't mind he, him pronouns, but they still identify as a daughter, as an association to their gender. They might affiliate two of their genders with two separate age groups, where they have a girlhood and a manhood, where a shift happens in their gender because a shift happens in their spirit after a certain point in their life that they already know about and anticipate. And so, we have to be open to the possibilities that the world gives us, because it's not just the world that gives it to us, but, it's, again, like, it's things that we inherit. It's, streaks, like, of our souls, right? Like, it's things that are coming up that we need oftentimes to be our fullest selves. And so it's super important to just be able to at least see the beauty in that, so that we can let those things happen. So don't ever be ashamed of those types of changes. And for the babies, the youth in particular, we have traditions older than this country's existence. Let these lawmakers tell you nothing. Because honestly, like, how are you going to let a country found on theft, killing, stripping people of their dignity and connection to themselves tell you about yourself? You can't do that. We have to know better. This is what they do. What it was designed to do. We are people who don't sit real pretty inside Western gender binaries, and that's okay because, well, let me not put up no middle finger, but, fuck this, well, I guess I cussed anyway, but, we don't like that. We don't like that anyway, so it's okay if you don't fit. But so it's also the question, like, how you gonna try to tell me about myself and your country is illegitimate? Like, that it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. So you need to acknowledge this and hold on to it, because there's no reason that a country this trash should be telling you about who you are when they don't even have the range, honestly. But then also, just to go along with that, like, homophobia and transphobia, it's just really nothing for us to accept. The fact that so many people in power are so disengaged from something that is so harmonious with the rest of life, disengaged from the various blends of Allah's creation, that is what should be feared. That is what should be considered fearful, I should say. Because how far must you have actually come to not be able to recognize Allah, to not be able to recognize God in this body? Okay, I don't trust no spiritual leaders or political leaders who can't honor gender variance, transness, and queerness. And especially when it comes to diviners, for example, male diviners, especially cis men, but not only, or male priests, people who we might be trusting to provide us spiritual care. If you're supposed to be reading me and you can't even see any of the variations of my spirit, then that means you're not even seeing me. So what's the point? When your perception and interpretation is just going to be diluted by your lack of sight, what's the point? Make it make sense. Why would I see you when your lens ain't even big enough to see me? And so, as we continue to find out about ourselves and our legacies that we've inherited and those connections to our current genders, we will succeed in anything that we do. Because when we know ourselves, we know where we've come from, we know where we're heading, right? We know about our lineages once again, and we can carry that forward and we can help protect our future communities that are coming forward. So be in touch, y'all. Be in touch, and, don't be afraid to be yourself, regardless of whatever this colonizer-ass world tells you.